Well, welcome everyone who has joined us today. You are at working with Indigenous Lineal Descendants, a River Management Roundtable presented by River Management Society and some of our partners today. So thanks so much for attending. This is a topic that is pretty big, and we're just going to take a teeny bite of this big apple with someone who's very close to the issue, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit and provide some good, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So River Management Roundtables, if you're familiar with RMS, we host them once every month on the second Tuesday. And all those types of people are those who are members and part of our community, and you're always welcome. They're free. And we hope that we provide opportunities to think a little bit more about your job, whether it's an on the river type nuts and bolts type thing or cultural workplace culture topic as we're talking about today. And just group norms, please be mindful of those who are also joining us. We hope that to the degree that it is humanly possible that everyone here turns their camera on, so everyone can be, here and listening, and we know you're engaged in this conversation. So I'd like to welcome the two folks who will be doing most of the speaking, because I'm gonna be quiet in a few minutes. Ione Jones is the leader for KHIMSTONIK. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. Ione is an enrolled member of the Confederated tribes and bands of Yakama Nation and a lineal descendant of the Fishhook Bend Snake River Renegade Palouse. She is an accountant and real estate broker with years of experience in working for tribal governments. And then also who will be facilitating the discussion and has helped us put this program together is Tanji Kasi-Otu, who works for the U.S. Forest Service. She gained her interest in public lands through an internship with the Hispanic Access Foundation in 2018 and with the National Park Service Intermountain Regional Office of Public and Legislative Affairs. With an interest in multi-use mission of the Forest Service, she has pursued a resource assistant opportunity with the Wilderness and Wild and Scenic Rivers program, where she now works as the program specialist in the Washington office staff. And also the person behind the curtain here is Becca Price, my colleague, who's a communications coordinator, and she'll share a few things with you at the end of the program.
No, you gotta go back over there.
So take it away, Tanji.
Thanks, Risa. Yeah, as Risa mentioned, I had the opportunity to work with Risa and get introduced to Ione and all of her experience and learning more about her mission and her organization in order to put together a session today. I also work with the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council. So we've got representation from each of the agencies that manage wild and scenic rivers specifically. But we've sought to sort of network and kind of figure out how, as an interagency council, we can support and talk about the role of river management in intersecting with tribal priorities and communities that live on and near rivers and their water resources. So that was sort of like the context where this session came from. And so the two main goals that we have for our time today is to give Ione this platform in order to share the vision and the mission for her family and community and for her organization as well. And then through hearing the unique nuances of her story and through the way that she works within her community, we'll be able to see a lot of the unique nuances. And so we really want to be able to investigate the complexities and the impacts of land ownership and other concepts like enrollment for lineal descendants and tribes today. So hopefully we'll have a fruitful discussion at the end. And so with that, I will hand it over to Ione.
Good afternoon, everybody. She'ich Clowet. I would like to ask that we take a few moments of silence to acknowledge the land that we are all in or at today, and to share respect for those that came before us and those that will follow. Thank you. Today, I would like to introduce KHIMSTONIK, WOW-YICK-MA NAH-KHEE-UM NU-SHWA, the people of the Lower Snake River Palouse. My English name is Ione Martell Jones. I am an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation, and I am a lineal descendant of the WOW-YICK-MA NAH-KHEE-UM NU-SHWA, the people of the Lower Snake River Palouse. I am an independent advocate and the executive director president of the nonprofit KHIMSTONIK. The focus of my work in both roles is to understand the systems affecting Indian country today and to identify the ongoing disparities arising out of centuries of cultural misappropriation and struggles over land. Our elder, KHIMSTONIK, shared stories of her kinship family growing up, surrounded by traditional indigenous resources. These events shaped her life and the young ones she raised. The unwritten stories she told us as children became core parts of our souls and were etched into our minds, our entire lives. We connect all our education and work-related experiences through these unwritten stories in the words our elders spoke. As the people of the Lower Snake River Palouse, we work to maintain the lifelines to the regions that the Creator provided. It will always be critical to protect our history and our people from attempted erasure by governmental acts like eminent domain and misguided acts of force against our cultural and natural resources. Our organization became effective on May 18th, 2022, in large part due to the members of our board. These members understand the nature of land acknowledgement, as well as hold connections to our shared ancestors. We embrace the unwritten words and songs, the acts of kindness, love, and affection dear to our hearts for those that left an imprint until we're together again. We keep our faith and connection. We are in perpetuity, time immemorial. We move forward for our future generations, not yet born, to continue to share the roles as true stewards of the lands. I'd like to take the time to acknowledge the picture that's on the screen for the audience. This is just to share part of the traveling that was applied during our original people and persons that lived along the villages. This is a dugout canoe. And as you see, it is a very long boat that is not wide like the coastal boats. So we have differences in how the culture and the lands had to adapt to be able to provide transportation. Out of our ongoing work to hold to the lands from the Creator and our cultural knowledge, our nonprofit started as an idea years ago. In 1993, the Audubon May-June issue featured us in Keepers of the Past. The individuals that you see sitting in this picture from the Audubon, the elder is KHIMSTONIK. She is sitting in front of Ice Harbor. And in this particular feature, she's sharing her history and her connection prior to the dams being built. The individual in the red dress is my aunt, Carrie Schuster, Ayatutanmai. She is another elder that we continue to pass on her work as well. Graphic reach. KHIMSTONIK's initial focus is on Southeast Washington, specifically on the ancestral lands of the Snake River Palouse people. In the future, we plan to expand our work and support to other Indigenous original peoples seeking to reconnect with their pre-reservation history and within Indigenous communities. Board of Directors. Doris Squeox. She has years of experience as a cultural resource professional overseeing development projects with Grant County Public Utility District. She continues supporting the traditional ceremonies passed down to her by her ancestors. Joe Day Gowdy. His experience is from chairman of Yakama Nation, Tribal Enterprise Red Thought LLC, and currently active in the community as vice chair with Spirit of the Waters Journey. His words and songs are most uplifting as he shares solidarity in the work to protect our people. Jessup Jones Sr. He is a professionally licensed water operator in Washington State. He has experience as a maintenance mechanic and special projects on the Yakama Nation Reservation with Indian Health Services tied to tribal water systems. His support to protect and understand water usage and consumption in Indian country is invaluable. Oh, I apologize. I got to learn how to go forward. Attempted erasure. Through both our personal and professional work, we defend the lineal descendants of the original Indian census and the indigenous original people and persons not tied to reservation life. We work towards the decolonization of lands by bringing the ancestral and elders' voices, relationships, and knowledge of the land to the public. We also help develop resilience across the region by communicating our knowledge with local, regional, state, and federal governments. Our strategies towards defending cultural practices and resiliency and decolonizing the land emerge naturally from holding fast to our indigenous ways in the face of enormous and ongoing efforts to force us to give up our culture and our lands. I'd like to share with the audience that the map that is on the screen is a map from 1877. It identifies a portion of southeastern Washington. And as you see, Snake River is written in. And some of the original islands that were there prior to Ice Harbor and the other 3 dams being built, you're still able to see. Right along this area, 9, 10, and 11. This is part of today's area, which is known as USAC National Park, Fishhook. Fishhook is one of our ancestors. But I just wanted to share the map with the group today. We encourage you to stop by our events page for updates on our progress as we build our partners and allies, impact model and programming. Sorry. KHIMSTONIK programming, as well as the efforts taken by myself and larger community to defend and decolonize, takes the following form: research, educate, and embody. Research. This information is now found in fragments across scattered books, reports, and legal proceedings that incorporated our ancestors' oral history. Some of these texts aim to support us, but most were used and continue to be used to break our ancestral relationships and community efforts. We have started to gather and weave this information back together to repair the rupture. Our next step towards bringing this information to the public is our tribal relations programs, aimed at addressing our needs identified by our communities in the bordering lands of federally recognized tribal areas. The individuals that you see on the screen are the individuals that were standing next to Ice Harbor as our graveyards were being desecrated for the building for the 4 Lower Snake River dams. The young man that's standing next to the elder in the center is my uncle. The individual in the center is one of the last elders identified, part of the 11 from the Indian census of June 1915. He is sharing with the newspapers and the public his outcries for our graves being disturbed. This is Harry Jim, Indian name, Himtutsaki. KHIMSTONIK unburies the cultural and ecological histories and shares this with the public and provides this information to government officials as they are elected or appointed. 2024 Healing Canoe Journey. The goal of the canoe journey is to connect descendants of the region's original people to the cultural and environmental living stories of the area. Tribal relations. Develop, implement, analyze, and share our research with the lived experience of the Palouse. Mapping project. Incorporate research findings to our mapping project, detailing the history of the relationships between the original people and their land, and share the maps. Embody. The language used by our ancestors continues to be spoken by the Snake River Palouse today. Our families still work the lands where the indigenous foods and medicines continue to grow and thrive. Acts across all our strategies, we use new materials to push against destruction, assimilation, and violence to remain true to all the Creator's people. The picture that you see on the screen are members of our various bands gathering roots in one of the fields along the Public Forest Service. managed lands. I'd also like to share that what you can't see in the picture are the tools that are used today to dig the roots. And so the individuals, as they're leaning down, what they're doing is they have a digger cupping. And this is the handle that they're holding on. And what they're doing is they have found the roots and they are using the edge to safely take out the roots and leave the tops so that they can continue to grow for the next food gatherers in the following year. But these are part of the annual gathering cycles. But I did just want to share that what's not in the picture is actually diggers and tools that are used to help safely pull out roots or medicines. What we are working towards, maps incorporating buried histories and current land relationships. Cultural Interpretation Center for off-reservation permanent living. Ceremonies and activities like annual gathering, canoe journey, canoe camp, cultural activity days year-round, land back to the lineal descendants, indigenous, sustainable, and community-focused land development. Mapping project. Mapping project summary. The mapping project incorporates accurate locations for the indigenous original villages and homelands and will supplant the current mapping approaches that show only the settlers that stole land from our ancestors. The project also identifies the cultural and land relationships within the membership of the federally and non-federally recognized bands. (2024) Healing Canoe Journey Canoe Camp. We posted pictures of our recent canoe workshop held May 2023 and shared the activities during our annual gathering. I encourage you to stop by our events page so that you can see all of the wonderful smiles for the individuals that were able to share their experiences. 2024 Healing Canoe Journey, Reclaiming and Creating. Our 2024 Healing Canoe Journey will begin a future tradition of connecting the descendants of the indigenous original river families to this region's deep cultural and environmental relationships as a way of life. At the journey, elders and leaders will pass songs, language, and roles down to our young ones. This is about living our culture, not performing it. During our community ally networking, we're seeking assistance and expertise from Southeastern Washington's surrounding individuals, organizations not limited to tribe, state, federal, and most especially outdoors as collaborators for safe experiences during cultural and natural resource outdoor opportunities. I'd just like to share with the group today that the canoes that you see on the picture, this is actually during our workshop. It was such a beautiful 2 days of events. The water was so calm, and every night the kids were able to go fishing. And this is actually the boat here that they would fish from in the evening at the end of the day. So it was really appreciative. These boats and the safety planning was provided by Charlie Birdhat. Charlie Birdhat is a community ally that we hope to find our pilot canoe project that we will begin to really create true programs. My fingers are not being very friendly to me, and I apologize. I don't mean to be the worst presenter. I actually think it's going backwards. I apologize. Yes, I apologize. Palouse Indian homesteads and Aboriginal territory. The map that we have in front of us is a map that is from the book Renegade Tribe. This map identifies some of the towns that we've seen in an earlier map, but it also includes homesteads by various tribal members that refuse to enroll in any of the tribes. These names for some of the original families along this area are part of the original people and persons that refuse to leave their lands that are identified in the Indian census. And in 1965, there was an Indian Claims Commission final court case that was brought out. And as you see, there were various lines over this map that were discussed during this court case. But the dotted outline appears to be the court's final decision for when the case was settled. Through the mapping project, we plan to identify the different parcel holders along the Lower Snake River to engage them in our current and future canoe journeys. This allows us to actively engage with our local communities and share culturally appropriate stories about the land we all share. This picture that we're sharing today, oh, I apologize. This is a camas field that is from Moscow area. And it's a story that was shared by one of the families that still holds their homestead today. And she sent this picture to us just to share that the foods are still there. Networks of support. At this time, I would like to ask from the audience if Anastasia would not mind sharing some information on this particular slide. Anastasia is one of our group members that assists in our project and that is a very strong supporter. She also has a VIP that participates in our discussions. And when I see the VIP smile at the end of every meeting, I know we've had a very productive meeting. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Ione. And the VIP she's talking about is my 1-year-old daughter, Marigold. So that, yeah, she's with dad right now. But hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia. I won't take up too much time. I'm an attorney, one of the attorneys working with KHIMSTONIK and the Lower Snake River Palouse. And so we just wanted to offer this as like, okay, what does that support look like in a really concrete, tangible way? And there are two different tracks depending on who that community ally or supporter is, right? So we have the private property owners along the Snake River that Ione had mentioned we're actively identifying and going to reach out to, so we can talk to them about things like a cultural conservation easement, where it's basically an agreement between KHIMSTONIK and the property owners that allow them to, dock their canoes if they need to. If the river gets rough, they can gather certain wild foods and medicines on lands. And so that's one of the projects. And then obviously larger land donations along the Snake is another piece, with the goal to work towards some sort of community land trust and stewardship program built into that. For the government, we're kind of taking initially the route of looking at special use permits, which, are allow temporary access to government lands, but also stewardship and co-management opportunities, which I think, in speaking to some tribal liaisons for the U.S. Forest Service, offer a more robust long-term access point to these various lands. So I'll just pause there and hand it back over to you, Ione. I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise off of this slide in particular.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Intergenerational healing. If we can share these unheard voices in a way that genuinely reflects community priorities, we can build momentum and trust from surrounding Indigenous communities for future participations in land back campaigns. WOW-YICK-MA 2023. I'd like to share with the group today that just this past weekend, communities within Washington, Idaho, Oregon were actively living and engaging in cultural activities. Our family was invited to an event that is held by one of the original families that lived along Wallula. And during these hot summer temperatures, we've got to follow the seasons before the foods are gone. And so a lot of the families will go and stay in the mountains, sometimes months during the summer, sometimes weekends, depending on what their schedules are. But one of our traditions and part of intergenerational healing that assists us, that we share, that we're actively living our culture, is that as our children grow, they learn how to support and provide for their elders in their community. And so in this larger picture from this collage, you see one of our children that picked choke cherries, and this was the basket, and she shared it with her elder, and her elder was able to also share with the young lady, who incidentally is my daughter, this pink hat that she's wearing in this picture. She made that hat, and those are part of items that we are able to still use today in our food gathering events. And so this is a hat that my daughter is wearing, and that was made by hand by the elder there. Here's the other hat that the elder made that you see in the picture. And she made these and designed them herself. We also have our berry picking baskets. This basket was given to us by a family member from Wanapum area. These are leather straps that are tied around the waist as we are actively in the field picking berries. And so we're able to place the berries here and put them into the major basket and move on. But this is what we share when we say we're actively living and not performing, because these foods we use, if not in our pancakes and other baked items, but also to provide thanks in the first food ceremonies to the Creator. A part of that moving forward each year and a part of providing for the community. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much, Ione. There's so much to unpack here, and we do have a couple key questions to help guide our conversation today. And I guess, first of all, Ione, I just wanted to say I appreciate that you've outlined so many key cultural practices from your community and your family and really tied it to the vision of your organization. And I hope that for the group, I think starting at this space where we get the opportunity to hear the key priorities and you getting to share some of the outcomes of getting to do some of these cultural practices and activities and helping to lead it and facilitate it within your community has and what it means for you. And I'm hoping today that we can talk about what our unique role, and I know we've got a really mixed group here, so I want input from our group here as well in response to some of these questions. But yeah, there's folks working in river management from a lot of different angles who want to be able to engage tribal priorities. And I just think that you've been able to demonstrate a lot of the key nuances about your community and your family's history that shape your vision for the future. And so as far as our follow-up discussion, we just have 2 questions to tear off here, but the conversation is open for you guys to just provide any of your insight and experiences in relationships, but also questions for Ione. So we'll pitch a question to you, Ione, and if you want to expand on anything, you're welcome. And then we'll also pitch it and open up the discussion to the group. And I know you had the opportunity with Anastasia to outline some of the key ways that different folks can support and work alongside your community, but is there anything else that you'd like to expand on in that realm in regards to resources, knowledge, and relationships that further support the work of you and your organization?
Yes, thank you for that, Tanji. I believe that in order for the public lands to be safely used and appropriately appreciated by the public, that if our nonprofit, as well as communities along the various rivers, if we can engage in education programs to identify safe routes to and from some of the areas that Indigenous communities from the surrounding tribes visit. I also would like to be able to provide safety guidelines on various equipment or supplies that are being used. For example, when there are red flag warning days or poor air quality, how we can be prepared and still go out safely into the lands, and possibly just provide input and shared information over these areas so that community members can naturally engage with one another without feeling barriers between the public lands that are available to everybody. I hope
Yeah,
that
Appreciate that contribution, especially talking about a lot of these logistics. And it would be interesting for folks who do manage public lands or other areas regarding rivers to really take an inventory, like as the host, are you able to provide that type of information, that logistical and safety information, so that it helps to remedy some of the barriers of coordinating these types of activities. And I think in a previous conversation, Ione, you mentioned there's just a variety of accessibility levels, especially across the community, where it's like it could be some situations and events are easier catered towards youth, and some require more input and forethought if you're involving elders or if you're having intergenerational types of gatherings. That type of support could be really useful. I also want to open up to the group. Does anybody have any reactions to what Ione has shared regarding the types of support that would be really beneficial in working alongside our communities, or perhaps questions or just reflections from their own experiences?
This is, we have one question. It's not exactly on in response to your question, Tanji, but we had a question from John McLaughlin. When the Lower Snake River dams are removed, and note he says when, not if, is it proposed that formerly impounded lands be returned to the Palouse or other indigenous people connected to the river? It's a pretty interesting question.
I'd like to share one of our discussions in our slides that identifies research and assisting other lineal descendants and indigenous communities is by providing the mapping project and identify first where the villages originally were, and be able to identify where these lands are today. Because of the various changes from the direction of the rivers, from the different development projects, other issues over the centuries, some of the lands that were original villages may no longer exist. They could be inundated underwater. And so depending on the levels of water and how removing the dams are going to impact these areas, that's the first discussion, is to identify the environmental impacts, the natural resources, and the ties to the indigenous communities. And then pursue the data that provides the names of the original lineal descendants that held fee simple deeds. And as long as those individuals did not give up their land rights, then yes, we would like to assist in those individuals that were either forced through eminent domain or flood control act to obtain those lands rightfully. Because a lot of that information that we do not see, which for example, during my research, I was able to review the 1908 fee simple deed. And part of that language says forever. So yes, when these Lower Snake River dams are removed, we would like to restore and identify through land acknowledgement forever, and return those lands to the individuals that understood their rights and refused to be absorbed through the federally recognized tribes and remained original people and persons. Thank you.
I do think that provides somewhat of a good transition towards sort of the second question here, Ione, if you're interested in engaging it. You've mentioned a couple unique nuances about the history of how your community and your family has chosen to engage with with treaties, right, with land ownership and how those things have been impacted over the years, and how the system of enrollment has really played out, which is such a unique and nuanced system in the sense that in some cases, tribes seek to consolidate bands of people and families, and in other cases there's separation. And so navigating those types of decisions, as you've mentioned, has played out in a number of ways for your community. And I think as a group, I want to encourage us to sort of investigate these systems so that we can prepare for that nuance and expect it and embrace it as a part of understanding these relationships and understanding where these priorities come from for different communities. So Ione, I was just curious if you wanted to add any other considerations that folks might want to make about the impacts of land ownership or enrollment on lineal descendants and tribal communities.
Yes, Tangi, I thank you for that question. And if we could please, I'd like to move forward to the map that was identified for the Yakama Nation. The map that we have in front of us, this map identifies areas that the federal government mapped out for the consideration of 14 bands. In the state of Washington, there are 26 federally recognized bands. 14 of those 26 were forced to live on these lands. And not all of the individuals that were members of the categorized 14 bands by the government through the contract, which they identify as a treaty, refused to join, which our families did. And our supporting evidence is identified through the Indian census that showed each member's name that refused to leave their lands. Because in the treaties, some of the articles identified that as long as they remained on their lands, pending their deeds from the government, that they were lawfully there and could not be removed, which is why we have the Indian census to identify which ones that were legally and lawfully living on their own lands that would not be, that refused to be absorbed by an enrollment number. And as you see in this particular map, there's a red outline. The blue is the reservation lands, but the red are the areas that the surrounding original people and persons all were able to live and enjoy peacefully as true stewards. And so as lineal descendants, we are tied to these off-reservation lands that border federally recognized tribes. And so that when we go out and we would like to give thanks to the Creator and recognize new members by providing them new Indian names, or by providing a memorial for those that we lost, we go back to where our ancestors tied us to as true stewards. And so every year since time immemorial, the Palouse have gathered along the Snake River and have provided that gathering. Many community members have not had an opportunity to share that experience. Most individuals feel that now that we're on the reservation, we never leave, but there's a lot that we never went there. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ione. Yeah, thank you for helping to illuminate that for your particular story as well. Yeah, I'd really like to invite any reactions or questions as well to the content that Ione has shared. I think like, yeah, especially in consideration that a lot of the frameworks, as far as for like federal or state governments, and policy regarding engagement with tribes is sort of founded on some of these systems and definitions and categorization. I think it's good for us to recognize and, again, embrace the nuance here and sort of like the impacts on the greater community, since it is such a diversity of folks in different positions, but who still have a shared experience across these regional landscapes. So yeah, I know we've got a few folks who have worked or are themselves involved with tribes or are lineal descendants on the call. So I'd love to hear input from some of those folks, and again, invite additional questions for Ione in regards to this topic.
Just share, if others have questions, please, please chime in. But when I get a little confused about how particularly federal agency and tribal folks can begin to have a partnership, because it seems like there's just this fundamental disconnect between who owned the land and who now manages the land, and the definition of a people's land that might be defined by, say, a watershed or a valley or something like that, where now we are all in the United States, we're governed by states that have square edges and rivers that end, but they really don't end because they go to another state, those kinds of things, sort of artificial boundaries. But Ione's reference to the 1908 maps made me think it would be awesome to find, kind of contextual documents like that, which you just open that up and that can become the beginning of the conversation, because it's staring at you, who was there before. And even before you saying which tribe should be here or do this or that, if the tribes don't even know exactly now, or there's not an awareness of where they each, took up space, then, we can't always have those maps, but conceptually, that could be the beginning of the most fruitful, fundamental, honest discussion about where to go forward. So I really appreciate, well, it's cool that you have those maps. I know you're really excited to find them, but the context that they can provide is just golden.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, I welcome you to share your thoughts.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ione, for your presentation and all this information. I have a question for you about land back. I saw that you, in one of your last slides, had a quote in there with land back mentioned. And I work predominantly in Arizona, where there's a very large, disproportionately to other states, large amount of tribal lands, reservations, and native populations. And so it's a topic that comes up a lot in my work on our public lands. And there's a range of ideas about what land back means. Some people that I follow a bit really take it to the most extreme level of, let's just dissolve all current ownership and return ownership of the land to the local native tribes. And then there's other perspectives like, let's devise co-stewardship mechanisms like what we see at some of the new national monuments. So I saw in your presentation the slide which Anastasia narrated on the mechanisms that you're devising to form relationships through conservation easements or special use permits. And I'm wondering if these would sort of satisfy your interest for land back, or if you see them as furtherances of the colonial land law devised out of English law, because ultimately these systems are still artifacts of our land tenure legal framework.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate your question. And I do agree on a portion of what you shared with us in regards to the colonial mechanism in which the contracts were written and the historical process that was actually applied, which is why there were so many different types of checkerboard ownerships within these areas. There are different types of homestead and land patent languages that are applied, but in the end, when we're looking at these areas, what we're focused on and discussing are right-of-ways that were issued. And these right-of-ways had detrimental effects to the natural resources and the ecosystems that are there today. And it's really our goals to protect that ecosystem and rebuild and try to retain what little is left so that the lands can continue to develop in a natural way. Because at this time, what we would like to do, if possible, work with wetlands, identify all of the different sedimentations, the different water levels, everything that we can. If we can work with other river management societies, Columbia Riverkeeper, Spokane Riverkeeper, Snake River Riverkeeper, so that we can share what's happening actually by the development and the runoffs from some of the overused and exposed lands. And so, yes, I agree. Encumbrances, taking in eminent domain, those are, but at this time for us, the focus is making sure that these natural resources do not continue to be harmed, and that the focus to restore, retain, and rebuild so that we are sustainable and resilient as a community, that the salmon, the orca, and the human beings, the Nittites, the part of that circle of life, that we can rebuild that. And unfortunately, encumbrances, right-of-ways, that might be a shared vision as a collective within the communities to come together and understand we are limited. Wildland fires are coming up like crazy in Washington. I don't know where you guys are at today, but for the past 2 weeks, we've had to wake up to orange skies. And so this is where I share that if we can work together with the various agencies, the public agencies that hold these leases and that manage these areas, and really discuss how we can work together and share our limited resources and identify where we can protect the projects and where we can subsidize one another. So if we need to do river temperatures on behalf of Columbia Riverkeeper, then KHIMSTONIK would be a part of that process. If we can identify the different pollutants that are going into the rivers that are hurting, let's say, when people go hunting and the garbage that they leave and the birds that get lead poisoning, there's so many projects that we can build together, that we can identify our limited resources and build that as a collective.
Hey, Ione. I apologize for interrupting you. I just want to real quick let folks go that do have to leave. We've got a couple closing slides and a survey for folks, and then if people want to stay on, we can continue the conversation. So sorry to interrupt, but real quick for folks who have to leave, we did record this session and we will post the recording on our River Training channel. It's on YouTube. We'll email out the link to you as well, along with the link to a survey. Risa dropped that link in the chat. So please take a second, just let us know what you think. It's super short and it helps us to make these sessions more valuable for you.